Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tech Exec Podcast, where I help you create teams worth leading. As always, I'm your host, Ben-Yosef, and today we'll talk about communication progress. If there's something that I think too many tech executives don't do well enough, is the ability to communicate with clarity. Coming from a technical background means that oftentimes we use communication skills that are more attuned to how engineers prefer to talk and not as leaders, especially when you have to communicate with many people who are not technical at all and when the stakes are much higher. And therefore, by being aware of that, I think you can really upgrade your communication abilities and fast. First of all, let's talk about how you can communicate better and thus minimize the micromanagement and mistrust that you might feel around you. Many tech executives have told me that they feel like the CEO and their peers are trying to micromanage them, which oftentimes means that they're constantly being asked how things are going, what's happening, what's the status of this, did you think about that, maybe you should do that. And they see that people constantly are, you know, breathing down their necks, always there and present. If this is happening, communicating better can really help you ameliorate the situation because when that's happening, oftentimes it's because people feel a sort of fear. For them, there's a stress, there's something at risk, and that's how we automatically react. We sense that something is not safe enough, it's insecure enough. We're going to be checking up on it to make sure that it's more likely to be progressing as it should. So, to fix that, in air quotes, what you can do is start communicating better so others understand what's happening. And as you start doing that with time, you'll see the micromanagement decrease because there won't be need for that. They will see what's happening. Again, as long as what you're communicating eventually makes sense. If you're communicating that everything is always on fire, I'm guessing you're still going to get micromanaged. But yeah, makes sense, at least partly. Now, let's talk about transparency. The number one thing you need to be aware of as you're communicating is that when you're communicating with peers, with the CEO, with potential customers, they need to see transparency, as in they can understand what's happening. It's not as if all of a sudden you appear, oh, by the way, we were just working on something for the past couple of weeks and that's not going to work. That's not good enough. Transparency is about seeing progress. How would you feel if you were staring at a progress bar that's just stuck for 3 hours and then jumps all the way to 100%, even if, it got there, as opposed to something that shows you the progress, tells you we estimate that it's going to take between 2 and 4 hours. And then after 50%, the estimation is becoming more and more precise. And that gives you a lot of security. You can see the progress. The same happens with you in your role. You have to be transparent, show the progress, explain what's happening. Doing that by itself can already make you feel a tremendous shift in how communication is happening and how much trust you're getting. So start with being transparent. How can you show others what are you doing, what's happening? Show that you're on top of things. It's not about constantly being in status checks, but it's about showing that you're on top of the important things. As a senior leader, you are not supposed to have too many of these that are relevant to your peers at any specific moment, meaning that you can do that better. Next, you need to communicate in a timely manner. So it's not just about being transparent, it's about ensuring that when a change happens and it's critical, people see it as soon as possible. So if you realize that something's not going to work out, don't let me know weeks later, let me know much sooner. Okay, raise the flag. Let me know that something might be going off the schedule much sooner. So at least I feel like you gave me all the context in the right time. So we could have done something. If you come to me at the last second and tell me, oh, by the way, that's not going to be shipped this sprint, I ain't got anything to do. It's just way too late. And that's fine. Similarly, I recently talked to someone who had this issue of working with the CEO, and the CEO really wanted to see how, how we're doing. What's the progress of the research on this? Can I trust that this will be done or not? And us coming from an engineering background, we sometimes speak of uncertainties in a way that's not necessarily easily translated and grasped by others. So if you're unsure about something, which is fine, you need to also communicate how unsure you are. So, if we're looking at a big task and there's a feature and there's some research involved, if you feel, if you just say, "I'm not sure we can do that. That's hard. We need to check." What you're communicating to the other party, oh, this just might be impossible. But sometimes when you say that, you can provide the extra context. Like, I'm not sure about that. We'll need to do some research. We'll probably know better if we invest a couple of days into this. Or, I'm not sure. We've never done something similar, but I would wager this would require something between 2 weeks and 4 weeks, something like that. Communicate and provide that extra context so others understand what exactly is happening and whether you're unsure about something being feasible at all, feasible within the timeline, within the cost, speak in sfumatura. This is, Italian for gradients, like you would see in Renaissance paintings. You don't just provide black and white, possible, not possible. The world is not in binary. We have to learn to work in all of the analog in between because we live in an analog world. So you have to think about how you provide this sfumatura and help others understand what's happening, where we can find a compromise. Where are the areas where we're more certain about, and where are the areas that are riskier? And doing that really helps your communication. That means that even when you're communicating things that aren't necessarily good, you're doing it in a way that helps others trust you and see what's happening, see what's possible. So you're not communicating in a way that leads us to a dead end. You communicate in a way that's collaborative, that's cooperative, and we can try and come up with a different alternative, even if the path we're looking at doesn't make sense and will work. And lastly, and this is something I've been talking about a lot, ensure that you're not speaking in too much jargon. No one needs your jargon. When you're talking to your peers, when you're talking to the CEO, talking about refactorings, about that framework, about that cloud service, about that API, about all the different things in a way that's not understandable to others just serves to confuse them. I wouldn't want to work with a doctor that just speaks in jargon and so I don't understand what I have, what's my condition, how serious it is, whether I'm in grave condition or I just need to take an Advil, right? The same applies to you. Don't use fancy words, don't use jargon in terms that others don't understand. Always think about the fact that communication means nothing if you're doing all the talking, yet the message is not clearly received. The purpose of communication is to communicate a message, to convey something. And if I'm using language, if I'm using terms that the other person doesn't understand, I'm not going to get my goal. I'm not going to do what I set out to do. So instead, think about how can you communicate in a way that's clear. Try and make some analogies. Try and use some different ways to make this similar to past situations, to examples from other companies, from the media. Try and communicate in a way that makes things more digestible and understandable to others. And that will really set you as a different type of tech executive, that can speak business and not just tech, which is, I think, the role of tech executives, being that bridge between the tech part of the company and the business and the stakeholders. So if you do that, you will quite fast become the tech executive your company deserves and not just, yet another CTO who's obsessed about plainly the tech. That's it for this week. Thank you for joining me. As always, if you like this, check out the show notes where you can get my weekly newsletter with more videos, my podcast, an article, and 3 exclusive insights every week. Thank you. I'll be here next week.